And I know you want to get to WebCore. One more question from the audience. Did either company make any new innovations not previously recognized from this new data and analysis?
That's a great question. I didn't, when I showed the product carbon footprint of this slide, I think you can see the playground on the left is more of a traditional playground, and the playground on the right is a new carbon light playground. And I can see, and I think you can see that it's not only elegant, it's a beautiful sculpture actually, and a beautiful product, and has substantially reduced the carbon input, or the carbon impact. So they are innovating in designs, and they're coming up with more beautiful and highly functional designs for the kids as well. So I think that's a great question. There's been some innovation in product design coming out of Playworld. So turning to WebCore, we have a lot of people on the East Coast. WebCore is the largest commercial builder on the West Coast. You know, their focus is on very large-scale projects, and they realized a number of years ago that LEED, the current building standard for green buildings, is focused on the use of the building, and there's this enormous bubble of carbon that occurs when you build a building. And they realized that they had some control over that, and felt like the direction of the industry needed to be to look not just at the use phase, but at the whole life cycle of a construction project. We partnered with them to begin to solve this problem and to help them begin to look at their suppliers and the carbon impact of all of their construction processes and materials. So their goal strategically was to be a leader in carbon efficient construction. They want to manage the carbon cost of every project and use carbon along with cost and quality to begin to evaluate their suppliers. What we've done with them is we've performed what's called a hybrid analysis of multiple projects. Historically, that allowed us to get a broad picture of every component that goes into a high-rise construction project in terms of its carbon footprint, and prioritize, give an understanding of who the big emitters are, and then begin to work with suppliers to identify supplier-specific metrics in key areas of a new construction project. We continuously iterate and refine this project as companies come out with new products, and as WebCore innovates in construction processes and procedures. So this is an example of a residential high-rise analysis where we tend to look at the projects in three general categories. That is the core of the building, which is typically concrete or steel, the skin, which involves the windows and the wallboard and such, and the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which WebCore further divides into dynamic and static sections of the building. But like in the example I showed you in the beginning, sort of more general example, we looked broadly at a particular building. That gave us the guidance we needed to dive more deeply into concrete, which WebCore does not produce. Our first look at concrete, we start with the U.S. average on the left coming out of our database. That gives us the indication as to where to drill more deeply with the individual supplier, and then do a more deep dive so that that company now has a carbon metric of their concrete, can begin to reduce their concrete impact through using our data for new designs of mixes, and begin to differentiate their products. WebCore incorporates the carbon footprint of the particular mix into their selection process, and concrete suppliers that are innovating and doing lower impact mixes get slightly preferential treatment, in the selection process for new projects. Drilling further into this concrete project, we've gone now from looking at WebCore construction projects in general, diving more deeply into supplier. This particular supplier is looking at concrete manufacturing efficiency by location. It could also be done by product. And on the vertical axis, kilograms of CO2 per square foot. And this lens has been very informative to them because they've been able to identify some economies of scale which would be expected, those dots out on the right, and also some diseconomies of scale. So they're able to now look at best practices in various manufacturing plants, compare themselves to the U.S. average, and begin to adopt best practices across their enterprise, as well as innovate in specific mixes of concrete. This has given a huge boon to them in terms of innovation on multiple scales. The results, first of all, from a WebCore perspective, they're having a decent year, quite a good year this year. They've been winning very large-scale projects. Many buildings are now looking, owners are seeing that a green building is an attractive building. They've recently won the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission building and a number of other multi-million, $100 million projects, in some part because they are the only construction company that can report the full cradle-to-cradle carbon impact of a construction project. They're continuing to build a reputation and brand. They've won a number of awards this year. They're becoming more and more as a recognized leader in this field. They're satisfying their customers because they're meeting their needs for very green buildings. And they feel as they begin to work with suppliers that they're positioned not only to reduce carbon, but as carbon costs and fossil fuel costs increase to be competitive in their future products from a cost perspective. So if I can just...
I have two questions from this. It's a good breaking point.
Yep.
And I'm impressed with the high, rich quality questions that are coming from the audience. We definitely have some expertise and some great thoughtfulness in the audience. So one is, and a new question just came in too. So one is, since the built environment is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, do you see carbon metrics being integrated in LEED scorecards?
That's a great question. I hope so. We think it's a huge missing piece of the LEED scorecard, and we think that there ought to be, for example, the WRI standards in particular should be incorporated as part of LEED, and we also believe that LEED should move from looking just at the use of the building to the whole life cycle of the building.
And in the case of WebCore, this comes from Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. Is this their success in winning these large-scale project bids due to their efforts in reducing carbon, or from their already existing a well-established reputation in a down market?
I think I'd have to say it's both. Or as a well-known builder, they've had a lot of success on the West Coast. And certainly that's a major contributor. Nobody's going to contract. I don't believe that they're going to win a $200 or $300 million project simply because they know the carbon. They surely have the ability to execute and the proven ability to execute. But in a very competitive industry, I think they'd say that understanding the carbon impact, where, for example, the San Francisco PUC building's stated goal is to be the greenest building in the United States. Without knowing the full life cycle impact, I don't think that the San Francisco PUC building could achieve that goal, and WebCore was the only construction company that could provide them that data.